Hey everybody, welcome back to our film of the week. Hope you guys been enjoying the content channel as of late. I've been putting out a little more content lately, just for a few weeks. It's been just maybe like 3 days, 4 days later. It's just been at my own pace, and just this week I have a lot more content to put out. So yeah, so hope you guys are enjoying the all the new content that's around the channel right now. So for this week, obviously, it is a kind of a important week for Warner Brothers as they have now rolled out the brand new DC universe with their film, of course, that being Superman, which me and my brother will be discussing in the next video after this, because we will be seeing it actually on Friday. So stay tuned for a review. And I was going to do a review of a Superman film, namely the Christopher Reeves film, to kind of, contrast the latest or the earliest of the Superman movies to the most recent incarnation. But I didn't get around to watching it, so and also money is frankly just a little tight right now. So I'm going to go off by something that I actually have seen, and I feel it also still is noteworthy to discuss the specific film because we're actually going to be discussing the previous incarnation of the DC universe before it was rebooted by James Gunn. That being, of course, Snyder's take on DC characters. And we have talked about Zack Snyder in the past with films such as Man of Steel, which we did a film of the week for. We also did talk about, in the same universe, we talked about films such as Suicide Squad. And I believe when it came out, we talked about the director's cut for Justice League. So now, to kind of complete that whole discussion of that Pacific universe, let's talk about where that universe actually really started, because Man of Steel was kind of its own thing. But this film we're going to talk about was where things all started to kind of boil and ultimately give birth to the DCEU, as it was called. That film we're going to be discussing today is Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice, which was, of course, directed by Zack Snyder. I believe written by Chris Terrio. I believe that's who it is. I could be wrong. Released in 2016, so about 3 years after Man of Steel was released. And as the title suggests, this is a Batman and Superman feature. And at the time, still to this very day, first time the Batman and Superman appeared on screen together in live action. And this follows up from Man of Steel, follows up after the events of Man of Steel with, Metropolis, in ruins, after Superman fights Zod and all that. And the film starts with the introduction of Batman, and who's played by Ben Affleck. And we are introduced to Bruce Wayne's perspective through the events of Man of Steel, basically giving a human perspective as to all of what was happening between basically that of godlike beings. And he takes it in a very negative way, as he actually sees loss, he sees lives being taken, and he views Superman as an enemy. And as that is going on, we then are brought back into Superman's perspective as he is now dealing with his presence being seen through everybody. Everybody sees him. Everybody's talking about him, either through a political point of view or just through a humane point of view. Everybody has something to say in regards to Superman. And he is taking it quite heavily, and he's trying to figure out what that actually means. What is Superman in this specific age? And through all this, a very odd character in the form of Lex Luthor, played by Jesse Eisenberg, appears, and he starts to create little nuggets here and there to pivot two specific people against each other. And those specific people, as the title suggests, is Bruce Wayne and Clark Kent, aka Batman and Superman. And eventually these two get at it. Wonder Woman, who played by Gal Gadot, eventually comes into the mix, and our heroes eventually perhaps settle their differences and fight a greater threat for the greater good. This was, as I mentioned up top, this was pretty much the starting point for what we now know to be the previous incarnation of the DC universe. And there was a lot of pressure riding on this film, for a lot of fans, because of course this is a gargantuan type of feature when you're pitting Batman and Superman on the same screen, and also putting them at odds of each other. So this also came out the same year as Captain America: Civil War, and I feel as though that having that film come out the same year as this is quite unfortunate given the quality that we're dealing with here. Because, speak positively for a second, there's a couple of noteworthy things about, I think in terms of just Snyder's overall just aesthetics, I think that he brings some interesting visualizations to his work. I kind of compare him to many ways like Michael Bay, to where he is visually driven and his visualizations are detail oriented, and there's in terms of just frames, there's some interesting things to literally look at. The costumes, just the sometimes in just the effects, just by the scope. There is things there that can be admired, and more so than Michael Bay, there is a flicker of where this may be integral to a plot or may be integral to some form of storytelling. However, as I'm alluding to, in the same vein of Michael Bay is that, unfortunately, Zack Snyder also bears, there's a very strong, apparent lack of grip when it comes to actually telling a cohesive story. Because this is an issue that I also had with Man of Steel, where like half that film feels approachable, and then the second half of it just blows up into something of a massive, just visual fest. Batman vs Superman kind of plays out the same, except it is longer, and there is a lot more things that they're trying to now juggle with. It's not just Superman now. We have to juggle now with Batman. We have to juggle Wonder Woman. We have to do all these things, and the problem with that, with having all these things having to exist at the same time, is that there is very little room for developments to really take shape. The closest you get to that, I would think, is within Ben Affleck's character, the Batman itself, which Ben Affleck itself does commendable. I mean, I don't think of him to be, anything great. I think, in terms of actual brutality, I think that there's something interesting there. But overall performance is okay. I'm not been a big fan of Ben Affleck as a performer, but he does a okay job. And I could say the same for the rest of the performances. Nothing extremely noteworthy there. Henry Cavill, I've never been super convinced as Superman. Funny, the wording on that. Gal Gadot is pretty stale. I mean, she's pretty much there to be a showpiece, and that's all that she really is, and she does fine. Amy Adams was also fine. Lawrence Fishburne was fine. Jesse Eisenberg is odd. As I said up top, it's an odd character, and a lot of it has to do with performance. I'm not entirely sure what he's trying to get at. I'm not entirely sure where that performance stems from. There's an illusion, some sort of idea that maybe he comes from an abusive family. I don't know, but it's like, it's just weird. It's just really, really weird, and I'm not entirely sure where the point of that specific incarnation. I'm not entirely sure what they're trying to get at with that. And again, kind of illustrative to my point of the movie itself. It's just at times it's trying to derive meaning, it's trying to derive purpose, and a lot of that, it just falls flat, and you're left with quite more questions than you are with answers. But the real fundamental flaw of Batman vs Superman is understanding these motivations and understanding these developments to when we do get to these specific points in the film when, we have these characters at odds of each other, because there's some suggestions to some commentary about, morality and about godlike beings and, their place within a mortal realm. What does that mean for the people who don't have that sort of ability that Superman has? I can see what the story is trying to do, and I can see some ideas that could actually be quite intriguing and maybe a little more investing. Problem is a lot to do with execution. There's a ton of scenes in Batman vs Superman that frankly I've just forgotten because they don't really do much for the plot. It's just pretty much just speaking around until we actually get to the visualizations, until we get to the points of what the title is, Batman vs Superman. When we get to those points, then your interest kind of peaks up a little bit. But before then, you're left with a lot of wordiness, I guess, if that's a proper phrase, but it just feels very wordy for the sake of being wordy. And like this a lot of the time, like it doesn't really amount to much at the end of the day. I could see what it's trying to do on some sort of level, but into overall execution, it just lands very flat, and it doesn't really strung up as much. Like it's trying to do something like a Nolan, like it's similar to that of Man of Steel, where Snyder clearly is trying to use a Nolan effect, a Nolan sort of manner to elevate his craft. And unfortunately so with how he operates as a filmmaker, and this extends to outside of the DC universe with films like I think it was what was called Army of the Dead and other films here and there. He just doesn't have that he just doesn't have that sincerity to really get your attention in that specific way. He's just more of a visual storyteller. And if he tapped into that more, I feel as though that maybe there might be more intrigue and more interest in other capacities. But he thinks of himself in a different way, like Michael Bay does, where you actually think that the developments, or they want you to believe, they think that their developments are that sincere, that strong. But really, they're pretty disposable and pretty worthless and not really worth investing into. I just don't really find myself all that intrigued behind the camaraderie and really the lack thereof, because it's really also incredibly muddled as to why these characters need to be at odds of each other, and also the threats that loom, or anything else that they want to bring up, a Justice League or whatever like that. Like all these things are just kind of being tossed around, and they don't really feel as though that they're being melded into a cohesive line of storytelling. It just feels like a lot of things, a lot of juggling of things, a lot of fragments, and less so of a cohesion, and less so of a framework of here is how we can build this information, here's how we can deliver this to you, to where it all makes sense. Again, the comparison in that same exact year, Civil War, when that came out, that film is able to build off from the point of when they read the chords, and then when they see the differences being built between people's perspectives, you can see the motivations behind why these characters would want to go at each other's throats. I don't really get that in this specific film. It's hard for me to really understand the rationale between why these two are so at odds of each other, especially when it's really more or less one-sided. You have more of an understanding of a character like Batman than you do with Superman. I don't see why Superman would want to fight Batman. I can understand why Batman would want to fight Superman, but I don't get the other way around. There should be that sense of gray. There should be that sense of conflict, but there just really isn't. So, if anything, if there's any conflict anywhere, it's all to do with structure, actual storytelling, scripting. Those are the big flaws and the big detriments that come within this specific variation of Batman vs Superman. It just is rather messy. It just doesn't have a straight line. It just kind of goes like this a lot of the times, and I frankly am a bit bored a lot of the time. Like there just is a lot of stuff that I forgot about that film. A lot of time. Like there's like some stuff here and there, like the court scene, like I guess some Brent Affleck working out, like stuff that just doesn't really mean a whole lot. What I carry from those scenes is more to do with visual, and not necessarily like, oh, this is an important scene for the story. Like the most important stuff in the story just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Of course, there's the infamous Martha scene, which everybody talks about, which, doesn't really add up. And that scene, all in some ways, kind of encapsulates the entire movie for me. Like, they think that they're hitting on something, and they think that they're driving something home, that there's some kind of meaning to be brought there. But it's muddled, it's also rather simplistic, and frankly kind of just dumb. That was really perfect timing. Frankly, it was kind of dumb. So, yeah, it has some things here and there to be commended, some okay performances, some interesting visualizations, but it is frankly boring. It is long, it drags, and it is just kind of a snooze, if you ask me. My mom slept through it. I mean, when I was a kid, I was a lot more excited because Batman and Superman, but, literally seeing it a few years later, it just has a lot of time to waste and not a lot of time to inform us and to intrigue us. And that's a bit really unfortunate given what is before us. A movie about Batman and Superman, that sounds great. Just wish there was a better film. So those are my thoughts on Batman vs Superman: Dawn of Justice. I wasn't crazy about it. I care about it in segments, just like specific scenes, specific visuals, but that's really it. That version of the DC universe was very muddled from the start, and it spiraled out of control after that. I never also took an offense or criticisms towards like a darker tone. I mean, I kind of admired a darker tone, to be honest, but I just wish that it was just more cohesive and just frankly just made more sense. Because at the end of the day, things just don't add up, and things just don't frankly just mean as much as they could be. But those are my thoughts on Batman vs Superman: Dawn of Justice. You guys, let me know your thoughts on Batman vs Superman if you guys have seen it. Of course, if you have seen Superman, let me know your thoughts there as well. Spoiler free, please, because me and my brother will be checking it out tomorrow. I guess spoil away, I guess, because by the time this video comes out, we will have seen Superman. But I guess just be respectful. Don't put spoilers in the comments just because some other people probably have not seen it yet. But let me know your guys' thoughts on all things DC related, with the past DC universe, with this new DC universe, what are your expectations with James Gunn's universe. Sorry, I hit my mic. But let me know all your thoughts in the comment section below. And that's going to be it for this video, guys. Thank you guys for tuning in. And until then, I will catch you guys in the next video. Bye.